The sun had barely risen, casting a soft golden glow over the small hospital room. Adeeze's heart raced with excitement and love as she gazed down at her newborn son, his tiny fingers curling around hers. The pain of labor seemed like a distant memory now, swallowed by the overwhelming joy of becoming a mother. Friends and family crowded the room, their voices filled with laughter and congratulatory cheers. Everything was perfect. Adaeze couldn't help but marvel at the little life she had brought into the world. The small naming ceremony later that day only heightened the sense of new beginnings. Her husband, Chijioke, stood by her side, his face alight with pride as they named their son, Jibola. The traditional chants of blessings echoed in the room, and Adaeze felt like nothing could ever go wrong. In that moment, she couldn't imagine anything but happiness. There was no omen, no dark cloud hanging over them. The future was a bright, unblemished horizon. The honeymoon phase of motherhood didn't last long. A month into her new life with baby Jibola, Adaeze was exhausted. Her maternity leave had ended, and the demands of her job at the marketing agency felt insurmountable. Chijioke tried to be supportive, but between night feedings, diaper changes, and managing an unpredictable baby, Adaeze was barely keeping it together. "Mommy, can you help me with this email?" Her boss's voice crackled over the phone, but Adaeze could hardly focus. Jibola was crying again, and she could hear his wails even through the bedroom door. She glanced at the clock, 9:30 a.m., and she hadn't even had time for a proper breakfast. She felt stretched thin, a woman torn between responsibilities. Her once perfect house now looked like a war zone. Clothes piled up, dishes left unwashed, and her hair, which had once been neatly styled, now hung limp and unkempt. She tried her best, but the exhaustion weighed heavily on her shoulders. One afternoon, as Adaeze struggled to balance work with motherhood, a gentle knock echoed from the front door. It was the new neighbor, Nkechi. She stood at the threshold, a warm smile lighting up her face. "I saw you were settling in, and I thought I'd introduce myself," Nkechi said. "I've got a little one too, and I've been meaning to offer my help. If you ever need someone to watch Jibola for an hour or so, I'm just next door." Adaeze, relieved by the offer, smiled gratefully. She hadn't realized how much she needed a break. "Thank you, Nkechi. I might take you up on that sometime." And just like that, Nkechi became a regular presence in Adaeze's life. She was warm, friendly, and seemed to know exactly what Adaeze needed, whether it was advice on baby care or an extra set of hands to hold Jibola. Adaeze couldn't have been more grateful. Things seemed perfect for a while, but slowly, Adaeze began to notice something strange. Jibola, who had been a peaceful baby, started crying for no reason, his small body racked with discomfort. His once rosy cheeks had become pale, and his weight seemed to drop with every passing day. Adaeze visited the doctor, who couldn't offer any explanation for his sudden change. "What's happening to him?" Adaeze thought, her heart heavy with confusion. It was as if something was draining the life out of him. The strange thing was, these episodes always seemed to happen after Nkechi had been around. At first, she brushed it off, thinking it was just the stress of motherhood. But as the days passed, the feeling of unease started to build in her chest. The sense of dread deepened. Adaeze noticed that small items were going missing. Jibola's favorite blanket, a bottle of baby lotion, even her own phone. And the oddest thing? Sometimes, she would hear faint noises at night, soft whispers, creaking footsteps. One evening, while Jibola slept soundly in his crib, Adaeze found herself staring at the empty living room. The television had been left on, though she could have sworn she had turned it off earlier. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up, and she felt a cold shiver race down her spine. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. As the days wore on, Adaeze's suspicions grew. The unsettling incidents started to form a pattern. Every time Nkechi spent time with Jibola, things seemed to take a turn for the worse. The baby's health deteriorated, his cries more agonizing, his weight dropping despite his increased feeding. Adaeze could not ignore the growing sense of unease every time Nkechi walked through the door. The woman's insistence on helping became oppressive. "I'm just trying to help," Nkechi would say with a smile, but her eyes, dark and knowing, never seemed to reach her heart. Adaeze found herself withdrawing more, questioning whether the help was as genuine as it seemed. One evening, after Nkechi had left, Adaeze felt an overwhelming sense of dread. It wasn't just the strange occurrences, it was the way the air felt after the neighbor had gone, as though something had lingered behind, something dark and invisible. Adaeze began to question herself. Was she being paranoid, or was there truly something sinister about her neighbor's presence? Jibola's health continued to spiral. Feverish episodes became more frequent, and the vomiting persisted. Doctors couldn't explain it, only offering vague diagnoses and prescriptions that did nothing to alleviate his condition. Adaeze was beginning to lose hope. Every morning, she woke up with a heavy heart, dreading what she would find when she went to check on her son. Her relationship with Chijioke began to fray under the weight of the uncertainty. He was frustrated, feeling helpless and increasingly distant. Their arguments became more frequent, the tension thick in the house. Adaeze started to feel alone, battling not just for her child's health but for her sanity as well. "I don't understand why this is happening," she confessed to Chijioke one night, her voice breaking. "It's like something is taking him away from me, piece by piece." Chijioke didn't know how to respond. He, too, felt powerless in the face of the growing darkness that hung over their home. One evening, when Adaeze was at her wit's end, her Aunt F dropped by for a visit. F was a woman who had lived through many things, some of which Adaeze had always dismissed as superstition. But tonight, as they sat together on the porch, F's tone was serious. "You need to be careful, Adaeze," she warned, her eyes narrowing with concern. "The people you let into your life, especially near your child, sometimes they bring more than just help. They bring things with them. Bad energy, unseen forces." Adaze's heart skipped a beat, but she quickly dismissed her aunt's words as old-world thinking. "Aunt F, you know I don't believe in such things. I'm sure it's just a coincidence." But F didn't relent. "Be cautious. The spirit world is not something we can ignore. It's watching, and sometimes, it takes what is most precious." Adaeze felt a cold chill run down her spine, but she shook it off. Her aunt's warnings seemed irrational, even absurd. She wanted to believe this was just a phase, something to be fixed with medicine or a few more doctor's visits. The pattern of misfortune became undeniable. After a particularly harrowing night, when Jabola had nearly choked while under the neighbor's care, Adaze's suspicions finally solidified into fear. It was no longer just about the baby's health, it was about everything else. The strange incidents around the house, the missing items, the ominous feelings that lingered after Nkechi visited. Adaeze started to connect the dots. Every time Nkechi came around, something bad happened. The baby cried harder than usual, seemed more unsettled, and grew even weaker. Something wasn't right. That night, unable to sleep, Adaeze sat down with her phone and began to search for information. What she found left her speechless. The neighborhoods where Nkechi had lived before were plagued by strange events, illnesses, accidents, and misfortune. It seemed like she had a trail of misfortune wherever she went. Adaze's stomach turned. Could Nkechi be the source of all the chaos? A conversation with an old friend from her previous workplace led to a startling revelation. Nkechi's past was not as spotless as she had portrayed. In fact, the young woman had a history of manipulation and even rumors of involvement in strange practices. Some said she had been involved in occult activities, trying to gain control over people and events around her. Adaze's heart sank. How had she been so blind? The signs had been there all along. The odd behavior, the subtle possessiveness, the way Nkechi seemed to hold sway over Jabola. It all made sense now. For the first time, Adaeze felt a burning desire to confront the woman who had once been her trusted neighbor. The confrontation was inevitable. Adaeze, her heart pounding, walked next door to Nkechi's house. As she knocked on the door, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping into a trap. When Nkechi opened the door, her usual warm smile faded slightly, replaced by an unreadable expression. "Adaeze, is everything okay? I need to talk to you," Adaeze said, her voice cold and steady. "About Jabola, about everything." Nkechi tried to deny everything at first. She was just a concerned neighbor, trying to help. But the more Adaeze pressed, the more uncomfortable Nkechi became. Finally, the truth came tumbling out. "I didn't mean for this to happen," Nkechi confessed, her eyes shifting nervously. "I was only trying to protect him, to make sure he wouldn't suffer the way I did. But it backfired. I never wanted to hurt him." The words were chilling. Nkechi had been trying to protect Jabola by using some form of ritualistic practice, something she thought would shield him from misfortune. But in her obsession, she had only brought harm. Nkechi's confession was hard to believe. She spoke of rituals, of powers she had attempted to control, of forces that were beyond Adaze's understanding. It was then that Adaeze realized that her neighbor wasn't just a kind-hearted woman. She had been using dark forces in an attempt to control events around her, to shield her own life from the suffering she had endured. Adaeze recoiled. How could she have let someone so deeply involved in the supernatural into her home? But it was too late to undo the damage that had been done. Jabola was already suffering. Adaeze knew she couldn't let this go. The damage needed to be undone. Desperate, she sought out spiritual leaders and healers, asking for guidance and a way to save her child from the curse Nkechi had brought. It was a long road of rituals, cleansing, and facing her own fears. In the process, Adaeze learned more about herself than she had ever known. The journey was not just about saving Jabola, it was about reclaiming her own strength and faith. The road to healing wasn't easy. Adaeze fought not just for Jabola but for her own sanity, wrestling with the dark forces that had taken root in her life. But with the help of trusted friends and spiritual guidance, she fought back. Each ritual, each step of cleansing, was like pulling away a layer of darkness that had clouded her family's life. And slowly, the fog began to lift. As the weeks passed, Jabola's health began to improve. He was no longer feverish, no longer crying incessantly. Adaeze could finally breathe again. The house, once heavy with tension, was now filled with laughter once more, but the scars of the experience remained. Adaeze had learned something profound about the fragility of life and the power of the unseen forces that sometimes influence it. Was it too late to fully heal the wounds? Could she ever fully trust again? And as she looked at Jabola, sleeping peacefully in his crib, she asked herself one final question. How far would you go to protect your loved ones, even from forces you can't see?